People love to talk about success like it's loud, like it announces itself, like it walks into a room and demands attention. But real success? It's quiet. It wakes up early. It keeps promises. It doesn't need witnesses. I learned that long before I learned what it costs. My name is Ethan Cole. And before everything went wrong, I was invisible in the best possible way. Not famous, not powerful, not rich enough to scare anyone, just stable. And in today's world, stability looks a lot like winning. I grew up in a house where money was discussed in whispers. Not because we didn't have it, but because we respected it. My father used to say something I didn't understand much later. If you want peace, don't chase more. Just protect what you have. At the time, I thought that it sounded like fear. Now I know it was wisdom. By 35, my life made sense. A clean apartment, a predictable routine, a job that didn't follow me home at night. I worked as a senior compliance analyst at a mid-sized corporate firm in Chicago. Not glamorous, but it is important. My job was simple on paper. Make sure powerful people didn't break rules they thought didn't apply to them, and I was good at it. Not because I enjoyed confrontation, but because I enjoyed patterns. Patterns don't lie. People do. I wasn't the smartest person in the building, but I was the one who noticed things. An expense report submitted at 2:13 a.m., a contract revision buried on page 47, a signature that looked copied instead of signed. Tiny things, things no one cared about, until they mattered. That's how I first noticed Marcus Hale. Not when he walked in, but when numbers around him stopped behaving normally. Marcus Hale didn't enter the room. He arrived, tall, relaxed posture, that dangerous kind of confidence that doesn't rush, the kind that assumes the room will wait. And it always did. Marcus was everything corporate America rewards: charismatic, aggressive, results-driven. He didn't climb the ladder. He removed the people standing on it. And somehow, no one ever blamed him. They called him a visionary, a closer, a man who gets things done. I called him something else. Privately. A risk with good timing. Marcus was the kind of man who shook your hand while already calculating how much you were worth to him. Not emotionally, economically. And once that number dropped to 0, you disappeared. The first time we spoke was brief. He stepped into my office without knocking, smiled, looked around like he owned the walls. "You're Cole, right?" I nodded. He leaned casually against the doorframe. "I like people who understand rules," he said. "They make the best exceptions." Then he left. Just like that. No threat, no warning. Just a sentence that stayed with me longer than it should have. People don't reveal who they are when they're angry. They reveal it when they're comfortable. Over the next 6 months, Marcus rose fast. Promotions, praise, private meetings behind glass walls, and with every step up, the data got stranger. Shell vendors with no digital footprint. Consulting fees paid twice under different categories. Compliance approvals routed around my department. Not through it. Around it. That's when I knew someone had given him permission. Here's the truth no one tells you. Corruption doesn't start with greed. It starts with silence. Someone notices. Someone hesitates. Someone decides it's not their problem, and suddenly it belongs to everyone. I did what I always did. I documented. No accusations, no emails copied to executives, just clean records. Facts don't need emotion. They need patience. Weeks passed, nothing happened, then months. Marcus kept winning, and I kept watching. At home, my life stayed boring, which I liked. I cooked. I ran. I read before sleeping. No chaos, no drama. I believed, genuinely, that if you lived carefully enough, life would leave you alone. That was my mistake. Because life doesn't attack chaos. It attacks order. The email arrived on a Tuesday, 9:06 a.m. No explanation. Just a time. And a room number. I wasn't nervous. People who are innocent rarely are. That's another lie we tell ourselves. The conference room was cold. Too cold. HR sat on one side, legal on the other. No smiles, no small talk. That's when I noticed Marcus, standing by the window, hands in his pockets, looking relaxed. He didn't look at me, which meant he already knew the outcome. The head of HR cleared her throat. "Ethan," she said, "this is a serious matter." I nodded. Serious matter, I was built for serious. They slid a folder across the table, printed emails, financial summaries, highlighted sections. My name appeared more times than it should have. The accusation was precise. Too precise. Unauthorized data access, manipulation of compliance records, conflict of interest, corporate language for one word, fraud. I didn't interrupt. I read every page. That's another thing about me. I don't panic. I analyze. The evidence was clean, almost beautiful, because it wasn't real. Someone had taken my credentials, my access logs, my reporting style, and used them against me, not sloppily, carefully. I looked up. Marcus was smiling now, not openly. Just enough. The worst betrayals don't feel violent. They feel organized. I explained. Calmly, I pointed out inconsistencies, timestamps that overlapped impossibly, actions that violated basic system logic. Legal nodded. HR wrote notes. Marcus stayed quiet. Then legal said something that changed everything. "We've already conducted a preliminary review with senior leadership." Translation. The decision was made before I walked in. Administrative leave, effective immediately, access revoked, badge collected. I stood, straightened my jacket, looked at Marcus. For the first time, he met my eyes. And for half a second, I saw something real. Not anger, not fear, confidence. As I walked out, he spoke, softly, just loud enough for me to hear. "You should have stayed in your lane." Power doesn't hate resistance. It hates witnesses. By the end of the week, my name was radioactive. Calls stopped. Emails bounced. Friends avoided eye contact. No one wanted to be adjacent to a problem, especially one already labeled. I sat alone in my apartment that Friday night. Lights off. City noise is bleeding through the windows. And for the first time in my life, I felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, not sadness, but clarity. Marcus didn't destroy me by accident. He destroyed me because I was careful, because I kept records, because I noticed patterns, because silence wasn't enough for him. That's when I understood something fundamental. The system doesn't break people like me. It uses people like me until it doesn't need us anymore. And somewhere between that realization and the quiet hum of the refrigerator, I made a decision. Not to fight back. Not yet. But to learn. Because if Marcus Hale believed I was gone, then I was finally free to see how he really operated. He thought the story was over. It wasn't. It was just entering the quiet part. There's a moment after a fall that nobody warns you about. It's not the impact. It's the silence that follows. The first morning after my suspension, I woke up at the same time I always did. 6:12 a.m. Muscle memory is loyal, even when people aren't. I showered, I dressed, I poured coffee. Then I remembered. I had nowhere to go. That's when it hit me. Not like panic, not like anger, like vertigo. As if the floor beneath my life had quietly stepped aside. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls, just headlines. My name wasn't in them, and somehow, that felt worse. When the system destroys you quietly, It doesn't need witnesses. By noon, the official email went out. Due to an internal investigation, Ethan Cole has been placed on administrative leave pending review. Corporate English. Clean. Neutral. Final. Within an hour, LinkedIn connections vanished. Not dramatically, just gone, one by one. People didn't unfriend me. They erased proximity. I called HR, voicemail. I emailed legal, auto-response. I reached out to a colleague I trusted. He replied 3 hours later. Hey, man, hope everything works out. I can't really talk right now. No punctuation, which meant fear. That night, I finally allowed myself to feel it. The anger. It didn't explode. It settled, heavy, dense. The kind of anger that doesn't scream, it calculates. I printed the accusation file again, spread the pages across my kitchen table, and I read them the way I always had, not as an accused man, but as an analyst. That's when I saw it. Not the mistake, the craftsmanship. Whoever framed me didn't just steal my access. They mimicked my habits, the order I opened files, the way I categorized notes, even my phrasing. This wasn't sabotage. This was impersonation. The most dangerous enemies don't attack who you are. They become you. Only one person had access to that level of internal behavior data. Marcus. The next step should have been obvious. Fight it. Lawyer up, public defense, expose him. That's what movies teach us. That's what gets people destroyed. I consulted an attorney anyway. A good one, careful, expensive. He read everything, then leaned back in his chair. This is airtight, he said. Against me? I asked. He nodded. Because here's the part no one likes to admit. Evidence doesn't have to be true. It just has to be convincing. Marcus didn't just frame me. He pre-convinced the room. Senior leadership, legal, HR. By the time my name was spoken, they were already protecting themselves. I asked the attorney the only question that mattered. Can we prove it was him? He didn't answer immediately. That was my answer. The law isn't blind. It just sees what it's shown. 2 weeks later, the termination letter arrived. Not in an envelope, in a box. Company laptop, security badge, silence, no apology, no conversation, just separation paperwork and a reminder about non-disclosure agreements. I signed nothing, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. Marcus, meanwhile, was thriving. I watched from a distance. Company announcements, industry articles, panel discussions. There he was, smiling, quoted, promoted to Executive Director of Strategic Operations. My position, with my department restructured, without me. Power doesn't erase people. It repurposes their absence. One article praised Marcus for streamlining compliance inefficiencies. That was me. Reduced to a problem he solved. I stopped reading after that. Not because it hurt, but because it clarified. You see, there's a lie we tell ourselves about revenge. That it begins with rage. It doesn't. It begins with understanding. I needed to know how Marcus did it. Not emotionally, mechanically. So I started where I always had. Records, public ones, SEC filings, vendor registrations, shell company databases. At first, I told myself I was just clearing my name. That was another lie. Because deep down, I already knew. Clearing my name wouldn't change the outcome. The system had moved on. I was already history, and history doesn't argue back. Weeks passed. I lived smaller, less noise, less spending, more time I'd never had before. And then something strange happened. Patterns began to repeat. Marcus's name appeared indirectly, not on documents, around them, the same vendors, the same consulting firms, the same accelerated approvals, different companies, same rhythm. Criminals innovate. Arrogant ones repeat themselves. That's when I understood something critical. Marcus didn't just destroy me to protect himself. He destroyed me to remove a variable, a witness. And witnesses are dangerous. Not when they speak, but when they remember. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. One night, as rain pressed against my window, I pulled out my old notebooks. Years of compliance observations. Things I'd flagged but never escalated. Because I believed in process. Because I believed the system worked. I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was useful. Marcus thought he erased me. What he really did was give me time and motive and nothing left to lose. Men like him fear chaos, but they underestimate the calm. I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and made myself a promise. Not revenge, not justice, preparation. Because the next time Marcus Hale and I crossed paths, it wouldn't be in an office. It would be in a system he trusted. He built a perfect setup. He just didn't realize I was still inside it. Disappearing doesn't mean hiding. It means choosing not to be seen until being seen matters. After my termination, I did something unexpected. Nothing. No posts, no explanations, no late-night messages defending myself. I didn't tell my story. I let it die. People mistake silence for weakness. That's because they don't understand what silence does. Silence lets other people talk, and people always reveal more than they intend to. Anger wants speed. Intelligence wants time. I canceled my subscriptions, sold what I didn't need, moved to a smaller apartment in a quieter neighborhood. Not because I was broken, because distractions are expensive. Every morning I followed the same routine. Wake up early, coffee, notebook, no job applications, no interviews. I wasn't trying to get back in. I was trying to understand why I was pushed out. The first thing I studied was the law. Not criminal law, corporate law, compliance frameworks, whistleblower protections, regulatory timelines, dry material, boring, powerful. Violence is emotional, regulation is permanent. I learned how investigations actually begin. Not with accusations, with patterns, small ones, unremarkable ones. A late filing, a vendor mismatch, a risk assessment adjusted just enough to pass. No single violation, just repetition. That's how Marcus operated. Not recklessly, predictably. I enrolled in online courses under a different email. Compliance auditing, financial forensics, risk governance. I wasn't collecting certificates. I was collecting leverage. At night, I read case studies, executives who fell without warning, companies that collapsed overnight, stories where no one screamed. They just vanished. The common factor wasn't crime. It was documentation. Powerful people don't fall because they're guilty. They fall because they're traceable. I stopped thinking about Marcus as a villain. That made him too dramatic. Instead, I thought of him as a system. Systems have rules, and rules can be learned. Months passed. No one checked on me, which confirmed something important. I was officially irrelevant. And irrelevance is freedom. I started reaching out, not to enemies, but to ghosts, former employees, consultants who left suddenly, people whose careers stalled for no clear reason. I didn't accuse. I asked questions. Most didn't reply. Some did, carefully, anonymously. Patterns emerged, not evidence, stories, careers cut short, warnings ignored, complaints buried, always near Marcus, never directly tied to him. If you want to hide a crime, make it part of the workflow. I began mapping timelines, who left when, which vendor appeared afterward, which department changed structure. What looked like chaos was choreography. One night, around 2 a.m., I noticed something small. So small, it almost escaped me. A vendor, used repeatedly across different subsidiaries, different industries, same billing structure, same escalation path, always approved under strategic urgency. I checked the registration. Shell company. Clean paperwork. Too clean. That was the moment everything shifted. Not emotionally, strategically, because now I wasn't guessing. I was confirming. I didn't rush. That's the mistake people make when they think they've found something. They rush to be right. I wanted to be useful, so I slowed down, cross-referenced, verified, waited. Patience isn't waiting. It's preparing without being seen. I learned how regulators think. They don't chase stories. They chase risk exposure. I needed to speak their language, not Marcus is corrupt, but this pattern represents systemic non-compliance with escalating financial risk. That gets attention. I never contacted authorities. Not yet. I wasn't a whistleblower. I was a student. Marcus, meanwhile, was expanding. New markets, bigger deals. The more he moved, the clearer his footprint became. He thought I was gone. That's why he stopped being careful, and that's when I realized something darker. Marcus didn't frame me to survive. He framed me because he believed no one would ever check behind him again. The most dangerous moment for power is when it feels safe. I closed my notebook that night and sat in the dark, not angry, not satisfied, aware. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about inevitability. Marcus had built a machine, a profitable one, efficient, illegal, in quiet ways. And machines don't collapse from punches. They collapse from audits. I looked at the calendar, marked nothing, smiled slightly, because the next phase wouldn't require me to attack, only to reintroduce friction. Silence had done its job. Now it was time to let systems speak. Power never collapses all at once. It leaks. By the time Marcus Hale noticed something was wrong, the damage had already been documented. Not by me. By systems designed to notice when people stop following their own rules. The first sign wasn't an investigation. It was a delay. A vendor approval that took longer than usual. A routine audit request that asked one extra question. Nothing alarming, just unfamiliar. Powerful people don't fear loss. They fear unpredictability. I never touched Marcus directly. I didn't have to. I focused on environments, regulatory thresholds, compliance triggers, risk-weighting models, places where behavior becomes visible without accusation. I submitted nothing under my name. I didn't contact anyone who could trace me. Instead, I helped others do their jobs more carefully. Former colleagues, junior analysts, people still inside the system. I didn't tell them what to find. I showed them how to look. That's the difference between manipulation and education. One controls outcomes, the other multiplies observers. The safest way to expose corruption is to increase competence. Marcus began adjusting, not because he knew he was being watched, because his deals stopped moving as smoothly. Approvals took longer. Legal asked for revisions. Compliance wanted documentation. He smiled through it. Publicly. Privately, he tightened control. More meetings behind closed doors, more urgency language, more pressure on subordinates. That's how I knew it was working. Pressure doesn't create mistakes. It reveals habits. I started hearing things, not directly, through patterns. A consultant resigns suddenly. A finance manager requests transfer. A vendor changes contact details, small ripples, but consistent. Marcus responded the only way men like him know how, by centralizing power. When systems get threatened, they try to become people. He approved things personally, skipped layers, accelerated decisions. Every move meant to assert control, made him more visible. I documented nothing myself. That's important. Everything had to be discovered by someone else. independently, because truth is stronger when it doesn't look coordinated. Months passed, then something bigger happened. An internal audit expanded its scope, not dramatically, just enough. One extra subsidiary, one additional quarter. That's when the shell vendor appeared again. This time with inconsistencies, different descriptions, same billing, the kind of thing junior analysts flag without realizing its significance. Real collapses begin with someone asking an innocent question. Marcus noticed. Not the evidence. The change in tone. Meetings got tense. Deadlines got aggressive. Mistakes began slipping through, not financial ones, human ones. He snapped at people, micromanaged, demanded loyalty instead of results. Power does that when it feels cornered. I watched from a distance, not with satisfaction, with focus, because now came the most dangerous phase, the moment when smart men make dumb decisions. Marcus did exactly that. He moved money, not illegally, prematurely. Funds shifted earlier than usual. Approvals backdated, justified under urgency clauses, perfectly defensible, until it wasn't. Arrogance doesn't ignore rules. It assumes they'll bend. That triggered something Marcus couldn't control, a regulatory flag, automatic, unemotional. Federal interest doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives as a request. Please, provide documentation. That's all it said. I didn't celebrate. I closed my notebook because celebration is distraction. The board was notified. Quietly, legal prepared responses. Marcus assured everyone it was routine. He believed that, which made him dangerous. Meanwhile, more people began talking. Not to me, to each other. When fear spreads, truth stops needing an audience. I removed myself further, deleted accounts, changed routines. I wasn't hiding. I was reducing variables. The longer the game, the less visible the player. Marcus still didn't know I existed. Not as a threat, not as a factor. That was the final advantage. Because the next time my name appeared, it wouldn't be in an email. It wouldn't be in a meeting. It would be on a list. And once you're on that list, you don't control the timeline anymore. Power behaves predictably when it's confident. When it's afraid, it improvises. The first sign wasn't public. It was behavioral. Marcus stopped delegating. He arrived earlier, left later, read everything twice. Men like Marcus don't do that unless something has changed. Confidence simplifies. Fear complicates. The regulatory request triggered a cascade, not investigations, questions. Legal asked for explanations. Finance requested clarification. Compliance reopened closed files. Marcus told them all the same thing. Routine, nothing to worry about. He said it too often. Behind closed doors, his tone shifted. Urgent, compressed, defensive. I heard about it indirectly, through timelines, meetings scheduled late, emails marked confidential, approvals rushed. That's when mistakes happen. Not because people are careless, because they're tired. Exhaustion is corruption's best accomplice. Marcus tried to get ahead of the process, not by fixing the issue, by controlling the narrative. He instructed teams to clean up documentation, a harmless phrase, until it isn't. Dates adjusted, descriptions standardized, language softened, perfectly reasonable, if no one compares versions. They did. The problem with modern systems is that they remember. Audit logs don't care about intent. They care about sequence. Marcus realized that too late. The second request arrived. This one wasn't polite. Additional records, expanded scope, external reviewers. That's when panic set in. Power never admits fear. It leaks it. Marcus called an emergency leadership meeting. No minutes, no recordings. Just loyalty in the room. He framed it as protection. Everyone here is family. which meant one thing. Someone would be sacrificed. He chose a mid-level finance director, blamed procedural oversight, clean, contained. It didn't work. Because the issue wasn't a person, it was a pattern, and patterns don't confess, they accumulate. I received an email that night from an unknown address. Just one line. "Did you see this coming?" I didn't reply. I didn't need to. When people ask that question, the outcome is already decided. Marcus made his fatal mistake 3 days later. He moved money again. This time, not early, sideways, inter-subsidiary transfers, legally complex, ethically gray, perfectly wrong under scrutiny. He was trying to create distance. Distance creates tracks. That triggered the final response. A formal investigation, no announcements, just presence. Compliance teams expanded. External auditors embedded. Legal went silent. That silence wasn't reassurance. It was containment. Marcus noticed me then, not by name, by absence. Someone mentioned my old reports, my documentation style, the precision. He asked where I was now. No one answered. The worst moment in any game is when you realize your opponent never left the board. He searched. Old emails, archived files. My name appeared. Once, then twice. Then too often. That night, Marcus didn't sleep. Neither did I. Not from fear, from recognition. The subpoena arrived the following week. Not addressed to him, to the company. His name was in the appendix. That's worse. Because appendices are where careers go to die. The board placed him on leave. Temporary, pending review. He smiled for the press, stepped back voluntarily, promised cooperation. Power never resigns. It pretends to be reasonable. I was added to a list that afternoon. Potential witnesses, former employees, relevant parties. My name was near the top. I stared at it for a long time, not with satisfaction, with finality, because now there was no going back. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was process, and process doesn't care how you feel about it. Marcus Hale built his career on controlling outcomes. Now outcomes were controlling him. Courtrooms don't feel dramatic in real life. They feel procedural, wood, paper, time. Marcus Hale entered the room the same way he entered every room. Straight posture, controlled expression, confidence practiced to muscle memory. Power doesn't vanish overnight. It lingers, even when it's already lost. He didn't look at me at first. Not because he didn't recognize me, because recognition would mean acknowledgement, and acknowledgement would mean fear. Denial isn't disbelief. It's delay. The prosecution didn't tell a story. They didn't need to. They presented sequences, timelines, transactions, emails that spoke without emotion. Marcus's defense was clean, professional, logical. That's what made it weak, because logic collapses when patterns repeat. I was called to testify on the third day. No dramatic entrance, no moment, just my name. I walked to the stand slowly. Not because I was nervous, because I wanted to remember it. The questions were simple. What was your role? What did you observe? What changed? I answered carefully. Not with accusations, with facts, dates, processes, deviations. Truth doesn't raise its voice. It sharpens its details. Marcus watched me then. Really watched. Not angry, not defiant, curious. That curiosity faded as the documents appeared. My old reports, my notes, cross-referenced with transactions that happened after I was gone. The implication was unavoidable. He hadn't framed me to stop wrongdoing. He framed me to continue it. The defense objected. The judge overruled. I stepped down, returned to my seat. That was it. No confrontation, no final words. Justice isn't cinematic, it's cumulative. The verdict came weeks later. Guilty, on counts that sounded small. until they stacked. Fraud, conspiracy, regulatory evasion. Marcus Hale was sentenced quietly. No outburst, no breakdown. Just a man learning what time feels like when it's no longer his. I wasn't in the courtroom that day. I didn't need to be. Closure isn't witnessing the fall. It's realizing you don't need to. The company settled, reorganized, issued statements full of regret and forward-looking language. I received an offer, consulting, advisory, a seat at a table I once cleaned. I declined, because the truth is, I didn't want power anymore. Power had taught me enough. I moved again. Smaller place, quieter city, different mornings. Sometimes people ask if I regret not confronting him, if I wish I'd said something. I don't, because Marcus didn't need my anger. He needed my patience. Revenge wants witnesses. Justice wants records. I never spoke to him again, and that was the point. The last time I heard his name, it was in passing. An article, a footnote. That's how most stories end. Not with impact, but with irrelevance. And that's the most complete form of accountability there is. They say revenge changes you. Maybe it does. But this wasn't revenge. This was what happens when someone mistakes silence for surrender and patience for weakness. My name is Ethan Cole, and the man who destroyed my life never realized I was simply waiting for the system to notice him.